Hello, everyone. Welcome to our online training for developers. I believe this is our fourth class. I am going to hand it over to Mark, and then we will cover the materials that we had said we were going to cover in the syllabi.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody, or good morning. Just for our orientation, this is our overall schedule. Today is July 7th. We are in our fifth call, which is reviewing the work from week 4 of the homework and the syllabus, and talking about what's happening starting in week 5, which begins today, right after this call. So without further ado, I believe Bart is going to handle most of the conversation today because it's the more complicated part that I try to stay out of. And I believe Vivian was willing to show and tell her work in this lesson. Last week, she was a little ahead of us. And so, Vivian, if you are still game to do that, we can make you presenter and give you the screen, and then you can talk through what you've done and raise any questions or issues you run into.
Okay, yes.
We have to unmute you too, I think. Oh, good, you are.
She is, yeah.
Good. I'll stay out. Go ahead.
I'm pulling it up now. So is everybody able to see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, all right, let me scroll down. So for this week, we're working on the children of the marriage. So for number 7, this is what I have here. All right, so look, it's been a few days since I completed this. Should I go ahead and test assemble this section, or?
Sure. Did you run into any difficulties in the course of doing it?
Oh, I don't know what's happening to my screen here.
Looks like you're
Can you
using
still hear me?
desktop. We can hear you. Yeah, it looks like you lost your connection.
Okay, it looks like my. All right, I can try and connect again.
We're seeing. We're actually seeing. Yeah, we're actually seeing the. We did briefly. There we go. Yeah.
Okay,
now we're
here we are. Okay, so I did not have very many issues. I thought that this was relatively intuitive with this part. The repeating took a little bit for me to set up, but I felt pretty good about where I ended on it. Just go ahead and test assemble. If it wants to test assemble.
working on it.
Yeah, so I thought this was the repeat information is relatively straightforward. So, all right.
Did you save? Have you been saving answers?
I have not been saving answers.
Okay. A good idea, by the way, if you're developing templates, because it can save some time in the testing process when you go to test the templates. Sometimes you want to start with fresh answers for a test, but a lot of times you don't want to have to re-enter everything.
Okay, so here, are there any children of the marriage? Here we go. And then so we can enter name. But why did it complete this? Oh.
It's defaulting to the last name of the petitioner.
Oh, I was careless and I didn't look that this was in the other order in the interview.
Yeah. Yeah, you probably usually want to have the first name first, so.
Okay, so this is so it's running fairly smoothly here. Well, I didn't finish it, so it's not.
It should be, oh yeah, that's something,
You deleted the second child.
yeah, but
The second child, yeah.
there's a
Oh,
stray character before the 12 at the beginning of the date is the problem. Yeah, with one child, you should be getting answers there. I believe. You could show us, yeah.
there we go. So it
The only thing
is.
I'm seeing
Sorry,
a
go ahead.
problem. It looks like only one child is getting shown in the
So
document.
it's excluding the adult child.
Ah, okay.
So this is an adult child here. If I add 10 years here and go to the document preview, it'll show
So both
of them.
Yeah.
It is not, it does still say two children. I made an error where it still will say two children in the event that one of them is an adult child.
Right. I don't know if we. I don't know if we. I don't think we showed or talked about how to filter or how to count. You know, they would be a little more complicated, but it's certainly possible to count how many how many minor children there are. That's not something I think we've covered in the training.
Okay. And then the next section is automating the table, and this did give me a little bit of trouble, just because when I often would find myself repeating just the information in a cell rather than the whole table at first. So I had to workshop that a bit. So then the addresses. And so that is automating the table. Is there anything I should focus as we go over this? Focus on?
I don't think there's anything that you need to especially focus on. I am interested if you ran into any difficulties, obviously, with it. And I understand the issue that you had with the repeating within a cell versus repeating the rows in the cell, because in order to repeat the rows, you have to select the entire row, and if you don't, obviously, it, as you discovered, it just repeats within the cell.
It does, yes. And
Yeah.
so that was something that was a little finicky, and it was just a matter of, you know, when I would create the field, I didn't highlight the entirety of the row or the cell. And so that was something that took me a little bit of time to sort out. But once I was able to do it, it went relatively smoothly.
And did you do the custom interview?
I believe I
No, you
did.
yeah. Yeah, if you go to the component manager, you'll be able to see that. So if you click on the component file properties, which is the little icon on the left-hand side, right there, exactly. And it will show you, yeah, there's your custom interview. You could show that to us.
So I have this custom interview. So ask petitioner information, pregnancy, and then it'll, if there are children of the marriage, it'll bring up the dialogues for children and children addresses. Otherwise, it will not. So this script I thought was relatively straightforward. Just the one if statement, no else if component to it. And if we go ahead and test it out.
And one thing you'll notice is that when you do a test, that HotDocs remembers the answer file that you were using during the test. So you didn't have to open that test answer file that you saved, which is convenient. Sometimes it can be a little tricky because sometimes you actually don't want to save it when you're doing tests, but HotDocs remembers and it saves it as well.
Yeah, and that's convenient, seeing that. And then as we can see when we toggle between, pardon me, the yes and the no, on the left window, we can see the children and children addresses collapsing and reappearing.
Yeah.
So I have that interview, and I have all these dialogues. Yeah, anything else that we need to go over?
Well, we did ask that, we did suggest that you enable your template for use with HotDocs Server. I don't know if you were able to do that, and that would be in the component file properties if you want to go to the component file.
So in the component file, all right, there we go. I hadn't, but there it is.
Yep. Okay, good. And that's necessary in order to upload the template to LHI. And I think if you tried to upload it without doing that, you would see an error message anyway. It will tell you that you have to do it. But it's always good to, since you're going to be using the template on LHI, presumably, or any template, Hot Docs template on LHI, it's always something good to do. And there are some, you'll notice there's some options there in terms of, if you go back to that tab, there are some options in terms of the behavior of the interview when it's deployed to the server, and some of those are those are actually the default options, but you can change them. We haven't. The next video covers help and resources, but you can hide the resources. You can have it showing initially. You can have it hidden initially. So you can. There is some control that you can have in terms of what's showing to the user, what they can turn on and off, etc. Usually people don't use the single page interview, and basically the single page interview would be every dialogue would show essentially on the same page. I have seen people use it on occasion because they think somehow that it is more friendly, but it's quite rare. Usually you want to people go screen by screen to show the interview. We do have some raised hands and questions. Let me just check here. Okay. All right. So Pat is asking if we could go through the steps to save the form again. And I'm assuming that means save the answers. So maybe you wouldn't mind doing that, Vivian.
Yeah. So we can go to test assemble. Oh, it's already asking this.
Yeah.
The answers have been changed during the session. So you'll get this dialog. It'll pop up whenever you close this interview window. This one that it's not letting me select, but this here, if you try and close it after you put in answers, it'll ask if you want to save. So you can do save as. You can give it a name. And then you also will need a title. And if you just click on the title text field, it'll automatically fill it with the file name you inserted. You can also add a description if necessary. You can use this folder to select where it will save and just hit OK. So now it's playing this up, so I can put in different answers. And then there's also just an option to save the answers under the file here.
Okay, so Pat is asking, so you did not have to check the box at the bottom of that answer file before you saved it. I'm not sure what that means.
The
that,
Hot Docs
yeah.
2005 to 08 answer file.
Yeah, you normally don't want to do that. It's really irrelevant for. There are probably some situations where people are in desktop environments where they're just using Hot Docs on the desktop where they might want to do that. I don't think I've ever actually encountered one, but theoretically there might be, I guess. But ordinarily, if you're developing for use on the server, that's not going to have any effect anyway. It just affects your local environment.
And Bart, you might just describe the difference between the built-in default answer management system that HotDocs provides, and your ability simply to save to the Windows file system.
Oh yeah. So it looks like, looks like, Vivian, that you had, and I can't remember when, I think we must have covered, I think we do cover this setting in the training somewhere, but you had changed the answer file, the way answer files had saved. So once you cancel out of this, and you can show us, I'll guide you to it, but you can show us. So if you go to, and you can do this either from the main HotDocs environment or from the menu here. But if you go to Tools and Options and File Management, which is third from the bottom, and you have choices. If you click on, if you did not change it, it's still on the default. The default is HotDocs Answer File Manager. I usually recommend that people change it to the other choice, which is use Windows Explorer. For somebody just doing development who's going to be uploading to LHI, it's probably, you can still use the Answer File Manager. It doesn't really matter too much. If people who are using it and HotDocs will save all of the answers basically to one place. If you want to be able to save your answers to different locations, then using the Windows Explorer is a little more flexible, because then you'll be able to save your answers and say, oh, I don't want to save them in the default location. I want to save them somewhere else. And if you go to, once you go to, let's see, File Locations on the left, and you'll see there are default locations for saving answer files. If you scroll down, there's an answer files. So that's where it's putting the answer files by default. And if you don't tell it otherwise, if you don't say, no, I don't want to save it to the default location, then it will save it to some, then it will save it to the default location. But you can save them elsewhere if for some reason you want to save them. If you want to be able to share answer files, say with another developer, then using the Windows Explorer to manage answer files is probably the easiest thing, because then you can put you can have a shared a directory that you both have access to on a server, for example, and save the answer files there. On LHI, answer files are saved. LHI handles the saving of answer files. You still have to save your answers if you want to retain them, but it's kind of a different environment, and you can save them there. There is the ability to download answers from the server. So if you're testing on the server, you can download answers to your local directory. That if you've saved the answers on LHI, you can download them to your local drive, and kind of, if you need to sort of examine what's going on with an answer file on LHI, people can also share their answer files on LHI with you. And if you and the downloading of answer files, by the way, is restricted to people who have contributor or a template developer accounts on LHI. So ordinary users can't do that. They can just save them on LHI. But if you have a developer account on LHI, you could download your answer file. We also added a feature a couple of years ago to allow developers to upload answer files to LHI. So if you've been testing locally and you want to upload your answer files to LHI, you could do that. Unfortunately, somehow in a recent update to LHI, that feature got accidentally removed. And no one said anything because they probably weren't using it. And then I went to try and use it one day and discovered that it had been removed, but it will be restored. So that's another feature that you can use also. Those features, the ability to download and upload, is kind of useful when you're testing, or when users are, if there's a user on LHI who says, I tested this interview and this went wrong, and it's not obvious right away what went wrong. Sometimes it's helpful to be able to download the answers and look at them locally and debug your template using those answers. And
So
see.
James had his hand up. Bart.
Yeah. Why don't I unmute James?
Thank
You're
you.
unmuted.
Thank you. And thank you, Vivian. What a wonderful job you did. You might have just answered my first question. I was going to ask, how did you change the path on your home page when you launch Hot Docs, Vivian? And it looks like that might be something we do at Tools, Options, File Management there. See that file path, you've done exactly what I'm attempting to do, what I'm wanting to do. Yes.
It's file locations.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
And then I just wanted to comment, when I ran my first test run of this, it threw up an error that said I had to close, and I emailed it to Jonathan actually. I had to close, let's see if I can get back to it. Please close the assembly window before attempting to test assemble. I wound up having to close absolutely everything except Hot Docs. In other words, Word, everything. And then it worked. And I'm not even sure I was able to replicate the problem, but I just wanted to mention it did happen.
Yeah, possibly what happened is that you launched an assembly from the library. And
Possibly.
so you had an interview already open, and then you tried to test assemble. So Hot Docs can only run one interview at a time.
Okay.
So basically, that's what it was trying to tell you.
Thank you.
Yeah. You can, when you're test assembling, of course, you can edit components and you can make changes to the interview in the middle of a test assembly. Let's see. I'm just looking to see if we have any other questions or else who wants to.
While we're waiting, Bart, let me see if I can get a volunteer for next week to demonstrate the homework from week 5, which is pretty light if you haven't already noticed. Is there somebody who hasn't had a chance yet to be on screen and be willing to be our guinea pig for our next call?
I'm going to unmute.
Yeah, most of you are muted. So.
Yeah, I'm going to unmute everybody, and then people may have to unmute themselves. Unmute all participants. Okay, so I think, unmuted everybody, but people may be locally muted. And I just did it twice. Hopefully that worked. I'm not hearing anybody, but people can raise their hands if they are not able to speak or put something in the question pane.
I saw a question. Pat Muller. I don't know if she had a request to go through some steps. I think when the demo was
Yeah,
going on? You did that?
Yeah, we did. Yeah, we got to that. Yeah.
Yes, he showed us.
Okay,
Yeah.
good.
So we would like to have a volunteer, and as Mark says, it's downhill from here. So it's you have ascended the heights, and you now can coast.
And you said the presentation, this is Pat Muller, you said the presentation will be built on what the homework for this week? What did you say? I might maybe misunderstood you. Of course, presented next week.
In the syllabus,
Yes.
it says 5th week.
Okay, I got that. Okay.
Yeah, and so there's there's methodology for developing templates, which is mostly mostly just for information. There's no actual work that you have to do, and then providing guidance to users. There is some the homework is around that. So.
Oh. I don't know. I'll work towards it. Can I send you something by, say, Monday afternoon to see if I feel comfortable doing it? Is that too late?
Well, I mean, we could do that, I guess, and you can, it would be nice if somebody else were willing to back you up in case it doesn't happen. But
right.
Okay. It's were you able to get through the homework for that we covered today? Did you have any difficulties with it?
I was not, because we had a data breach, and so I'm actually having it reinstalled on my computer because we had to wipe and reload data files.
Okay. So you lost all of your
yeah, anything that was on my hard drive, but I mean, I have my my documents and all of that, the homework and things like that.
Okay. We're just having an issue with audio here. It says all participants are unmuted.
Okay, now I'm unmuted myself again. This is Pat. I actually am getting the software reinstalled because of course that was installed on my C drive. So that's why I said, and like you said, that's kind of pushing it close for next Wednesday. So maybe someone else might want to do it.
And this is James. I'll stick my neck out and be your backup.
I appreciate that.
Sure. So I'm going to be doing the Montana dissolution template per class 5.docx.
Okay.
Is that right? Yeah. Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Very good. Thank you. Okay. I'll give it a shot.
And Mark is having an audio issue. Mark, when I hover over you, it says attendee can't be unmuted until they enter their PIN. Click to send their PIN. So I'm not sure what the heck that is all about. Because you're on the phone, it looks like.
Yeah, because we don't put a password or anything. It's probably the email that you got, but with your personal login.
Earlier.
But can I move Mark? Can I change him, like make him a presenter maybe? Would that help?
Yeah, that might help.
Okay, let me try that.
It's the Russians.
Yeah.
No, ours had to do with Switzerland.
Okay, I made Mark a presenter so we see your screen. Let's see.
Are you able to speak, Mark? Looks like not. Okay, so it looks like he says he doesn't need to. So any other questions or issues that folks have that we can address at this point?
Just one thing. So we basically are working with 3 distinct websites. It seems to me, right? A2J, LawHelp Interactive, and what's the third one?
But you,
Are all of these integrated in like a sitemap someplace? I mean, I'm still not entirely clear what A2J does. It was spoken of it was introduced in the lesson 1 videos, but has only been alluded to since.
sure. Well, I can sort of put all this together, and I will say also that not next week, but the weeks thereafter, we will Jessica from Cali will be presenting the you'll watch her videos, the trainings for A to J, and then she'll be answering questions and in the sessions that follow. So she won't be on. That won't be happening next week, but the weeks thereafter, the week. I have to be careful here to make sure I use the right terminology, but the next week will be the 14th will be our call, and that will be the last Hot Docs homework review session. And then thereafter, the sessions will be A to J, devoted to A to J. But let me try to sort of big picture to tell where Hot Docs A to J and LHI fit in. So first of all, there is no third website. There is, there's the desktop environment for Hot Docs, right? So you're dealing with, as a developer, first of all, you can work entirely in A to J. You can also work entirely in Hot Docs, or which is probably the most common model now, is that you can work both in A to J and Hot Docs. And the way that Hot Docs and A to J work together basically is that A to J provides the interview, the user interface, and Hot Docs provides the back end. It assembles the documents. So when you upload to LHI, you can, first of all, A to J has its own development website, the A to J author site. Now that's where you go to develop A to J interviews, and you can also use their assembly engine, which is referred to as DAT, D-A-T. And you can, or you can just develop an interview there and you can publish it to LHI. And when you publish your interview to LHI using the A to J author site, you then go to, it'll take you to LHI where you can enter information about the interview. And then you can upload, if you have an associated Hot Docs template, you upload the, first of all, you upload the Hot Docs template before you publish your interview to LHI. And then when you publish your A to J interview to LHI, you tell LHI which Hot Docs template is associated with that particular A to J interview. So basically LHI connects the dots, but you have to tell it, you have to draw the line between the two dots essentially.
And LHI is the web host?
LHI hosts everything.
Okay.
And LHI, what happens on LHI is that for an interview that you want to make available to users, there is a URL, and that URL has to be provided to whoever is going to be using your interview and or templates. And the URL typically is posted on a website somewhere. So, your state legal services organization's website might have links to, your interviews, is typically how it works. You can send somebody, if you're in sort of in the testing mode, you can email, to a tester, you can email them the link if you want before the template is before the interview is actually linked to from some source, because you want to make sure you test before you actually make it available to the public. So Mark is showing the metadata for an A to J interview on LHI, and you can see LHI URL right there. That's the URL. If you click on that URL, it takes you to the interview. So that's what would be, that link would be eventually someplace on another website where users would go, because users typically don't go directly to LHI. They usually get linked to from another organization's website.
Yeah, I think understanding it in a historical context may help you a little bit more, because the technology has been changing and luckily increasing. So basically, Hot Dogs was desktop, very robust in the private sector, finance and banking. Way back, Mark probably knows the date, but it was like about Hot Dogs is not new. It remains probably the most robust in terms of complexity, logic, and calculation. LHI was not called LHI. LHI was called LHI in 2009. From 2001 to 2006, there was a pilot to see if that capacity, after doing a lot of due diligence, could be create a server that would do everything that a server does. Allow people from all over the United States that are nonprofits to create hot dogs interviews and post them in a site. Have that site have security, have that site have data retention policies, have that site have accounts, different types of accounts for the different type of users. And that was a pilot that was run from 2001 and 2006 with Ohio State Legal Services Association. When that proved to be helpful, then Pro Bono Net, there was a competitive bid. Pro Bono Net competed for that to manage, create, and maintain the infrastructure and do all this kind of training. That contract was awarded to Pro Bono Net, and we continue to manage that. Circa 2004, I believe, maybe 5, Cali, that author, A2J author, got funding to see if they could create a look and feel like a new interface that would be more specific for self-represented, better, more graphical, and not, because LHI was created for like I said, insurance, banking, and lawyers, right? Experts. So the idea is, could there be an interface that was more user-friendly? And Cali developed A2J author with funding from the state justice interview. And that interface proved to be the one that self-represented litigants, after robust user testing, reacted better than, we're talking 2004 and 5, right? So it's a long time ago. So, and so LHI now works with Cali. We co-develop together so that whenever they do a change to A2J author, that change then comes to LHI after we test, and they test, we test, and then we do code pushes. A2J author had its own path of growth and evolution, and in 2017, I believe, or 18, after they released A2J author 6, they created the DAT, which is the document assembly tool. That is document assembly tool. So by then, basically, they created their own A2J author server for end users that allows people to author only with A2J author without having to have hot dogs, because prior to that, every A2J interview needed to have a hot docs interview because hot docs did the assembly. A2J did not have assembly capacity prior to that. So A2J created a document assembly that's native to A2J author. And the way I understand it is that that can be done with very simple and complex, interviews that don't have a lot of questions and won't have complicated or like really, the kind of things that you do with the hot docs interviews, which are much more robust. So now there are some states that are using A2J author to create DAT interviews that live only in the DAT that A2J has, but because we're partners, we also coded LHI so that those that want to have everything in LHI, so that everything is in the developer portal and you're under our technology and management and training and everything umbrella. If your program wants to have a DAT only interview in LHI, you can have that. And many programs have kept the A2J author and the hot docs backend together because that's how they do, the 45-minute divorce interviews, the complex child support, very elegant packages. They're using the A2J interface and the hot docs. So all of these are things that go into project planning that we're not getting very in depth here, but it's a fantastic question. And so before you start, once you sit down and you start making your project plan, and I'm not, like I said, I'm gonna email you guys probably in 2 weeks to offer to sit down with you. All of these are the things that you should be thinking about in terms of when you choose the software that you want to use, because it will be really dependent on the audience and the level of complexity, and also the usability and recyclability of your answer files, which with LHI, we have really focused on being able to let users and attorneys securely share with passwords and everything, securely share answer files, securely email, securely, take interviews from one interview, move those answer files to the second interview, to the third, because hot docs is really great for transactional document assembly. So all of that is reflected on LHI. There now other, because this area of document assembly is, there's so many people that need help. Other people created, who were LHI alumni, created another option that you guys have probably heard, which is called DocAssemble, which is it's a more object-oriented programming with Python type use of interview. And now DocAssemble is its own software, which can be hosted locally by legal aid programs or could be hosted with another group that hosts, I think that's called After Pattern. They host for fees, and those you can create, it's like a whole different world. So now exists that option. We're not right now, we may in the future be hosting similar capacity in LHI, but not right now. I share that on that more, in the monthly calls and stuff like that. Because the whole point of LHI is to be a national infrastructure where the legal experts can focus with their technology teams on creating the best plain language, gender neutral interviews that can share and reshare answers and will really maximize service delivery innovation, particularly remote workflows, not worrying about the technology piece, the enhancements, the Windows security issues that have impacted some people in the private sector and all of that. So great question. I think the choice at the end that you make would very much depend on your capacity, your strategy, the audience that you're targeting, and the level of complexity of the form, but also of the process. Because generally most legal processes is not just one form. So this may be a long story, but I think understanding the story as it's developing may help you some clues.
Yes, that background is really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, and so we're partners with A2J. We code together, we push together. With the other groups, we are friendly. Like we do joint calls once in a while. and they share what they're doing. Like there was a great December training about reducing complexity so your users don't have to deal with it, where we invited people from Neurologic and from Quentin, who's in Boston doing Massachusetts forms with Doc Assemble. We try to be collegiate because we're in the same nonprofit space. So, but when I email you to offer to do program planning, choice of software is one of the things that you have to consider, because that requires you to have a long-term strategy. If you're just gonna do like a little thing that it's just gonna be one use and you're not gonna recycle that answer, it's not gonna be sent or e-file with anyone, you may be able to use some tools. If you actually have a workflow where you have people come back and edit because it's a really intense interview, or you're doing multiple documents and you may eventually want to e-file it and whatever, then you may want to use other tools. And a lot of it is also who's the user. There's a lot of the LHI users are now all like 2 years of college or trade. We can no longer assume, like we did in the late 90s, that our users are not familiar with transactions online or with software. The capacity of end users has increased significantly. At the same time, all the things we hear about digital divide and the broadband and internet connectivity, those are real, and those are things that you factor in the design of your interview and the
It
instructions.
really got underlined with this COVID pandemic. Yes.
And I did a call. Let me pull you guys the video. If you're not on the list, I recommend you get on the list. The last call I did, I cannot share like what we learned from the pandemic, and a lot of what we learned, because we do support on the back end, is the last mile. People could not, they created the forms, but if the forms did not have instructions on how to submit to the court remotely, people were completely lost and frustrated, and our ticket request on e-filing went ballistic. And a lot of states created like shortcuts to e-filing with their courts that they gave us, and so those folks were able to fully benefit from the form. But the programs that did not connect people to the courts, or there was not like an easy path to e-filing that is beyond what we're doing, there were a lot of requests for support, and we tried to patch people up. But the pandemic made a lot of the barriers. It helped move a lot of people to remote, which is what I have always wanted to do since 2008. But it also highlighted how we have to be more collaborative and thoughtful, particularly with people who are only, people under 30,000 only have mobile. They're only connecting to mobile. All of us who have desktops and tablets, and like I have like 20 things for everybody in my family. It's really hard to grasp that some people may be on a Galaxy 7 trying to use the forms. And so you have to factor that in when you design your form, and the instructions that you give them, and the ability to save and come back so that they don't lose their work. So we learned a lot, and I'm excited about focusing on really the mobile piece coming up for us in terms of system messages and how we do support, but also talking to partners like you guys on instructions and things like that, so people do get the forms, even if they're on an old-fashioned phone.
I've just been bringing up the Washington divorce example in background, not to interrupt you.
No, go ahead. I think Washington is an excellent model.
Just because I think this group, you've been automating a very simple, Montana form, which has some old language about gender, etc. But since you will have a developer account on LHI, you can go and look at any of the 5,000 plus modules that are already there. And this one in Washington is a good example of a complex hot docs interview.
Do you want to show it, or?
Yeah, I don't think I want to go through the entire thing, but
you can download it from the portal.
you can download, or you can just run it. You can go on the portal and run it like any other user, and step through it, and you'll see a lot of the features that are being covered in the course and how they play out with a quite complex example. So, as a preview of coming attractions for you, it'll give you a sense of the power. And as Claudia and Bart were saying, you have the option of staying entirely within the hot docs world with only your desktop and one website, namely LawHelp Interactive. Or if you so choose, you can do a front end of A to J to a hot docs template, or you can do a to J completely self-sufficient document assembly module. So there's a lot of choices presented, and I think the key really is to get comfortable technically with how you do this, and then you wrestle with the deployment options as you consider how to build out your project.
Yeah, and if you want to talk about these things before I send you the email, I'm here. Send me an email. I'm a real person. I'll call you. We'll talk. And that's you know what I mean. Just and I try to be as honest and transparent, because for me it's about solving the access to, like, what is it gonna be best for your community and the partners that you work with, as opposed to market share for LHI. I maybe shouldn't say that in a recorded call, but it's true. It's about solving the access to justice, and what I know is that we're not gonna solve it in silos, and we're not gonna solve it if we keep everything, our wisdom and what we learn, our failures, to ourselves. We have to talk. We have to include other people doing good work, and we have to talk to our courts. The courts have to talk to us. And we can do more together. It's like rowing a boat. The more people we have rowing, the better the product will be. So if you want to talk to me about these software choices before, I will try to give you a very honest answer, so you can choose your technology investment, because you're not gonna. Most legal aid groups are resource starved. Most courts don't have a lot of resources for self-help, as surprising as that can be. So you want to pick the tool that will take you the long run, that will give you the 5-year plan, so that you're not like, oh, I started with this and it's not sufficient, it crashes or whatever, I can't do this, or now I want to do this and now I have to go and start all over. Better to
And
think about that before.
I should mention, by the way, that you're not necessarily stuck with one tool. We're working on a project right now where a legal services organization is going to have a interview for pro se litigants in A to J, and a hot docs interview for their internal staff. And they're going to look a little different because the internal staff can navigate quickly and they know what they're doing, but it's going to produce essentially the same document at the end of the day, except the document is going to reflect the fact that litigant is either self-represented or represented by the organization. So you can do, there's tremendous flexibility, that things you can do.
So thank you for asking the question.
I guess we're at the top of the hour, and we'll see you next week unless there's any other questions or comments before we wrap up today.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you
I
all.
really appreciate this.
Okay.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.